Lesson 7.7, Transforming Formulas. The essential question for this lesson is, how can you solve an equation for different variables? So we are going to take a look at different formulas and see how we can solve the equation using different variables. So for example, we have a couple of different ways to work on this. But first, let's work on transforming the equation in one step. Okay. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but the equation for finding the circumference of a circle is C, the circumference, equals 2 times pi times r. In this case, C is going to be circumference, and pi, we know what pi is, and r is going to be radius. Okay, radius is basically here. If you have a circle, around the circle is going to be the circumference, and the radius is going to be half of the length that goes across from one point to another in the straight motion. So in order to find the circumference, we have to know the radius, and we just have to multiply 2 times pi times radius. However, in this case, I don't know what radius is. I may know what circumference is, and then we have to plug it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply work on this equation. And let's say I'm solving for r, radius. I want to know what radius is going to be. So radius equals something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate the variable, and I'm going to see what I'm doing. In this case, I'm actually multiplying 2 and pi to r. So inverse operation is going to be dividing both sides by 2 pi, 2 times pi. Okay, then what happens is that my equation will be C over 2 pi equals r, or you can just write r equals C over 2 pi. I cannot go any further from here because all I have is these variables, r and c, and 2 times pi, you can't really multiply them, or you can, but you really don't want to, because later on you'll probably just use a calculator to plug in the numbers 2 times, and then you use pi symbol to multiply and everything. So this is how you solve for one-step variables formula. Okay, or how about another example? Finding an area of, let's say, a rectangle. Okay, area of a rectangle. The formula for the area of the rectangle is going to be area equals length times width, right? So just to make sure, I'm going to write area length times width. Okay, and let's say I have to solve for length. Okay, so I have to solve this equation for length. Then, same thing, I'm going to see what is the variable that I can work with. I have to make it L equals something. So I'm going to then do the inverse operation and get rid of the W. Okay, so what happens is that if I do that, they are going to cancel out. Same thing for this one, right? So they cancel out, and I am left with L equals A divided by W, or A over W. Okay, and that's it. If you know what A and W is, you can figure it out later on. But in this case, they're just asking us to solve for that certain variable. Now, sometimes you need more than just one step. So let's see, we have using more than one step. Okay, so what if you have to use more than one step? Let me make this a little better. Let's see, the formula to find out a perimeter of a rectangle, not an area. So we use an area, we are going to use a perimeter. So perimeter, which means adding all the sides of a rectangle, is going to be two times L, so 2 times the length, plus 2 times W, 2 times the width. I'm not going to write down what they are because we already established that L is length and W is width. And let's say we have to solve for the same thing, the length. Okay. Now, it's going to involve several steps in this case. First, I'm going to identify that L is going to be the variable that I want to isolate. If you notice, 2L plus 2W is in one team, and then P is going to be on the other team, or other side. So I'm going to see what can I get rid of in order to simplify this. So I'm going to subtract in this case because I'm adding 2W. I have to do the inverse operation. I'm going to subtract 2W. Okay. If I do that, I can't really subtract anything really from this section. So I just have to write down P minus 2W equals 2L. And I know that they cancel out. Now, after I cancel them out, I still have P minus 2W equals 2L. It's 2 times L. So what I have to do is to divide this by 2. That way, I can get rid of the 2's here. So my final answer is going to come out as L equals P minus 2W over 2. You cannot and will not, can't simplify the numbers here. Okay. Now, if you want to simplify, then you'll have to write P over 2 minus W, and I think it's more complicated. So don't simplify the numbers, okay? I'll just change it to don't. Don't simplify, because you can, depending on the formula, but don't simplify the numbers like these. Okay, so leave it like that. And L is going to equal P minus 2W over the whole thing, 2. What else? What else should we do? Now, if you are solving, how about for W? W is probably going to give you a similar answer. You just have to subtract 2L to the other side, and your W is going to be P minus 2L over 2. Let's try some other questions. For example, let's say solve 5a plus 7 equals b for a. So you have an equation or a formula, and you have to solve for the given variable. First step is going to work on inverse operation. So I'm going to first identify and subtract 7 on both sides. So I have 5a equals b minus 7. Once you're here, you're going to now still look for the a. So you have 5 times a equals b minus 7. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So a is going to equal b minus 7 over 5. The whole thing over 5. Okay. Or if you want to solve for okay, you have something that's already solved for y, and what if you have to solve for another variable that you have? So first step, always identify your variable and see what's going to be the first inverse operation. In this case, x divided by 3 plus 5 happened, so I'm going to do the opposite, which is going to be subtracting 8. So I can get rid of the 8, and it's going to be y minus 8 equals x over 3. I am dividing x by 3, so I have to do the inverse, which is multiplying 3. Okay, and I'm going to put the parentheses so that I can multiply 3 to both of the numbers. Okay, and simplify the 3's. So it's going to be 3y minus 8 equals x. Now, it's up to you if you want to distribute and make it 3y minus. You can do that too, but I think this way is a simplest way that you can work with. I don't mind if you leave it like that, so you can leave it like this if you prefer. If you feel like, oh, I want to just distribute everything and make it into simplest form, you can also do that too. Okay. So now that you have learned how to work with the formulas, you can solve problems using formulas. Okay, so it says using formulas to solve problems. Let's say, if you want to take a look at your textbook, it's on page 383. I'll use an example from the textbook. Let's say you plan a 425-mile trip to Bryce Canyon National Park. You estimate you will average 50 miles per hour. To find about how long the trip will take, solve the distance formula. D equals RT for T. So in this case, you want to find out how long it would take because you're solving for T. Okay, so let's see. D is distance. We know that rate is how fast you're going. So I'm going to first solve for T. I just have to divide T by the rate. So T is actually going to be distance divided by rate. So once I establish that, I can go ahead and plug in our information. Our information was distance was 425 miles and rate was 50 miles per hour. So I'm going to do time equals distance over rate. Now if you divide that, it's going to be 8.5 because it's 25 over 50. So you're going to take about 8.5 hours to travel 425 miles, an average speed of 50 miles per hour. So really all you have to do is to plug in the numbers that you know into the formula you get. Okay. How about if you want to find out rate? This is not from your textbook, so I'll be giving you another question. Let's say you're traveling to New York City and you're going to go to NYC and your distance is going to be total of 600 miles. Okay, you estimate your trip will take about 10 hours. So when you have hours, that's going to be time. And you want to find out your average speed. So I don't know what rate is going to be, but I know my equation works for all three things. So I don't know what R is. I have to find out R by dividing it by T, so I can leave R by itself. And R is going to be D over T. Distance divided by time. I'll just plug it in. So my distance is 600 divided by time is 10, so it's going to be 60. So my rate is going to be 60 miles per hour average. Super simple. It's really all you have to do. If you have fractions or let's say rational numbers for your question, let's say we have another one. You guys are familiar with the temperature. We have Fahrenheit and Celsius. So we also use the formula to change between Celsius and Fahrenheit. So the formula for the temperature is going to be Celsius equals 5 over 9 time, and then in parentheses Fahrenheit minus 32. So basically what you do is you subtract the Fahrenheit degrees by 32 and then you multiply that by 5 over 9. Okay, so let's say this is the Celsius and Fahrenheit. Okay, and you have to find out the temperature from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So solve for Fahrenheit. Let's say in San Diego temperature was 32 degrees Celsius. Must be summertime because it's pretty hot actually in Fahrenheit. So let's find out how hot it is in Fahrenheit. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the equation. Okay, my first step is to identify this. Now, I cannot work just yet, because I do have to work on this one first. Now, if I don't want to work on these fractions because it will give me a weird answer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a step further and do the last step, inverse operation. So I'm going to actually multiply the inverse of this, which is going to be 9 over 5. I'm going to do the same thing, 9 over 5. Okay, so if I do that, the reason why I'm doing this one first is in terms of PEMDAS, or the order of operation, you would actually work with the parentheses first, and then you would multiply after. So because multiplying comes after, you'll have to divide first, and then once you get the answer, you can work with the inside number from parentheses. So they cancel out, and I'm going to have 9 over 5c equals f minus 32. Okay. And then after that, I just have to work on the inverse operation. Next to f, I'm going to just add 32. So my Fahrenheit is going to be 9 over 5c plus 32. Okay, so now I have the formula. I'm not done yet though, because I have to find out the temperature for San Diego. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply put in the temperature, use this one, for San Diego in place of C. So Fahrenheit temperature for San Diego is going to equal like this. Okay. And then after that, after you have this operation, I don't mind if you guys use an estimated version of it. So let's see. I will have 9 times 32, which is 288 divided by 5, which gives me 57.6 plus 32. And that's going to give me 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is going to be my final answer in this case. So you can work on the formulas first and then put it in, because if you plug in 32 degrees Fahrenheit first here, you still have to do the same operation, and it may actually take more steps. So it's easier for you to just plug in when you actually know the formula for the F. So I think I've basically covered the lesson. You will have homework from the textbook, and we will go over the homework on Wednesday, or yes, tomorrow, before I have you guys turn in your homework, so you guys can fix anything that you guys are not so sure with. So that is that. Hopefully you guys can work on the homework. I'll write it down here. Homework is going to be from the textbook. I will have the textbook page available on Google Classroom as well. It's going to be from page 384. And then you'll be working numbers from 4 through 14 even. Yeah, let's do 4 through 14 even. And 1, 2, 3. And then I'll also have you do checkpoint quiz 2. And this is on page 385. And I would have you do the evens 2 through 12. Actually, no. Let's do 6. 7, 8, 9. Yeah, let's do 1, 2 through 12 even for this one. Okay, so work on these questions on a separate piece of paper. I will require you to take a picture and turn it in online. So have fun.